This episode of the Chris Johnston Show is brought to you by Sports Interaction. Sports Interaction is your homegrown sportsbook where local takes on an entirely different meaning, focusing on the teams, games, and players that matter to you. Sports Interaction is on the ground, on top of local trends, and offering prop bets that you'd never even imagined existed. And now they're introducing the Locker Room, the first of its kind in Canada, a live watch party for the biggest games of the week. Sports Interaction, your homegrown sportsbook. Go to sportsinteraction.com/STPN to open an account and bet local. 19 plus, please play responsibly. If you have questions or concerns about your gambling or the gambling of someone close to you, please go to connexontario.ca.
I know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
Powered by Sports Interaction, your homegrown sportsbook. Always remember to bet local.
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
Packed show for us on this Monday. We're going to talk about the Heritage Classic, Evgenii Dadonov, and the Ottawa Senators will also be a topic of discussion. We'll have You Can Bet That. But we are going to talk about Adam Johnson to start. Tragedy hitting the hockey world, unfortunately. Former member of the Pittsburgh Penguins playing a game out in the UK over the weekend, part of a freak accident involving a skate blade hitting his neck, and unfortunately passes away after that incident. There's a discussion to be had about neck guards and the safety on that point and other stuff with that regard. But CJ, we should start with this unfortunate loss and some of the different stories and tributes that have been pouring out in light of what happened. It seems as if, according to some of those stories, Adam was this great personality, this person who smiled a lot, who was so thankful for the handful of games he got to play in the National Hockey League, scored one goal, but it's a goal obviously he was going to treasure for the rest of his life. Would love to know your thoughts on Adam Johnson if you can.
Sure. One of the things I've heard from a few former teammates actually is that he was really known for his sense of humor, kind of a under the radar sense of humor within the dressing room too. And obviously someone that loved the sport. And I think what strikes me in moments like this and it really was tragic circumstances over the weekend to hear this, even if you don't know the player, is just how small the hockey world is. I mean, you scroll through his hockey DB page. He did play those games with the Penguins, but also in his time in the NCAA ranks. Obviously, he's spent a lot of years in the American Hockey League. He's touched a lot of lives of players all over the NHL now, and so I think that you feel the loss almost collectively as a community in hockey. There's really nothing good that can be said about the circumstances in which this happened. Just an awful thing. Terrible way to have someone's life cut so short, so painfully short as Adam Johnson's was. I thought Mike Russo did a nice tribute on The Athletic in terms of talking to some people that knew him back in Minnesota where he was raised, and really your heart just goes out to his family. I mean, no one's life should be lost playing a sport, even a sport that can be as dangerous as hockey at sometimes. And so I think that it really does hit home with a lot of different people and all over the globe that love this game.
The one goal he scored, I don't remember if I had mentioned it already. The one goal he did score was against the Minnesota Wild in Minnesota, which is pretty surreal to think about with regards to where he's come from and what he was able to do coming up from Minnesota to get to that point. But yes, our thoughts and prayers are with his family and with his loved ones at this time. A bit of a really tough situation to process, I can imagine, for that family. And you did mention the fact that Mike Russo wrote a really great tribute. There have been some other articles that have come out in light of this too, including one from Mark Lazarus that also kind of caught my attention with regards to neck gear and protective gear. And it's a discussion that I think a lot of people are going to start talking about in light of what happened here, where we're seeing people already asking, what's it going to take for the National Hockey League to step in and say, okay, we are going to make this mandatory? And we've seen people say, hey, you know what? I stopped wearing this because it wasn't comfortable to wear, or they have their reasons for doing so. Just this morning, you had put out a tweet about the English Ice Hockey Association mandating neck guards as of December 31st. And the only reason why it's not happening sooner is because of supply issues. And you could tell me if I'm wrong, but with some of the other unfortunate issues and freak accidents we've seen in the NHL, like a Clint Malarchuk or Richard Zednik, I can't think of any other league, I guess beyond the junior ones, who have stepped up and said, okay, we are going to make this part of equipment mandatory. So I wonder if something like this, even if it is a second division a tier league in England, if that does anything to change people's minds here in North America about this. I wonder if discussions like what we're having right now play a role in all of this, or public outcry. I'd like to know where your head's at with this.
Well, what I can tell you with certainty that this has done, Julian, is it started a lot of discussion, and discussion in meaningful places. You know, I look at the DEL in Germany, which has said that they're going to talk with their players about potentially mandating this. You know, neck protection has been mandated in leagues like the Liga in Finland and in Sweden. And, you know, people will tell you over there, I should note that maybe the type of neck wear that some players wear isn't adequate, doesn't do a good enough job to prevent it. So it's not to say that there isn't work to be done there. But I do think that these conversations are happening. And you know, with the NHL itself, this, you know, the skate cut story, it's always resonated with me how scary it is. Honestly, I remember Ilya Mikheyev's skate cut, I think it was in 2019 while he played for the Maple Leafs in New Jersey. I was covering the Leafs closely at that time, and just how frightening it was, frankly, to see the trail of blood as he went off the ice, the way his body language changed. It was just kind of like an innocent sort of collision he had, and the franticness in his voice, you could hear him in the arena. And so I've been sensitive to this story, and I do know people in the NHL's head office have been. I mean, Rod Pasma, who works as a vice president in hockey operations for the NHL, has really championed this. He cataloged every single incident that there is. He's pushed conversations forward. The topic was brought up last year at the general managers meeting in November about maybe grandfathering in some rules. And what we had this year, in fact, is the American Hockey League and the ECHL have mandated wrist sleeve protection and protection on the Achilles and the back of the leg for all players. And this was a result of the NHL discussion. I think it's a sign of what's probably going to happen in the NHL at some point. Now, that doesn't get to the neck issue. And I think it's quite fair to say from my conversations, for those that really understand the equipment industry well, that neck coverage might be the most challenging of the areas of the body to protect against these kind of cuts. That being said, there are neck guards available. There are base level tops that have some form of neck protection on them right now. And I know that there are actually some strides being made in terms of the cut resistant equipment that is going to be put into neck guards, where, I spoke for a story at The Athletic with a gentleman by the name of Greg McNeil, who's an equipment manufacturer out of Toronto. He spent 10 years of his life. This has been his life purpose, frankly. This is in retirement for him to try to prevent skate cuts in hockey, to push the conversation forward. And he said that in his opinion, something like what happened to Adam Johnson would be preventable with this new breakthrough that's happened with the kind of material that can be put into neck guards. And so, I don't want to at all try to spin this into a positive. I mean, the man's life is lost. It's awful, but I can say for sure that I think that there's already been a push behind the scenes before this incident happened on the safety front, and knowing that skate cuts have been an issue. And I would expect the velocity maybe of some of those conversations going to pick up now in light of this tragedy that's happened over in England.
By the way, for those who are subscribed to The Athletic, obviously we would love for you to subscribe to The Athletic if you're not, but Chris has the piece, Hockey Equipment Expert, on how to avoid another on-ice tragedy, 100% preventable. That's the latest story that he's dropped on this. Very much worth your time. I didn't play, obviously, I didn't play just ice hockey, period, but I'm more amazed at the fact that in hearing other people discuss it, talk about how they feel about wearing neck guards and the comfort level with it. And you see all these different companies who have invested into it and have, created different technologies for it, but it's still not comfortable. In Mark Lazarus' story that I referenced, there's a whole lead about how TJ Oshie read a story about someone who got cut in the neck by a skate blade and looked into getting all these different neck protectors and still didn't wear them. And now, because of what happened to Adam Johnson, that is what's changed his mind. I find it really interesting that we are not at this point where there is something comfortable enough to wear around your neck. And we've seen the innovations with helmets and with visors, and we've seen enough between Clint Malarchuk. You've mentioned all the other examples there. Richard Zednik is another example that I remember vividly, seeing him lose a lot of blood, unfortunately. We've seen enough to to at least have an idea that, there needs to be some kind of protection in that area for your wrist or your neck as well. But there should be more steps to have that in. I get you say there could be an idea of having a grandfather, but I think it should be mandated for everybody.
Well, I mean, it's fair to have that. I think that, the reason I think it will be grandfathered is because the closest comparable I can think of in my years covering the league is visors. And that's basically starting with the 2012-13 season. That's what the league said, is basically anyone entering the league from here on in is going to have to wear a visor. And that's what's happened. And we're down to just a handful of players left that don't have a visor, that obviously were exempted from being forced to do that and played in the league that long. I think that that's the best path to do it. I'm with you. In a perfect world, you'd say everybody has to wear this tomorrow. But, there's a huge number of logistical issues. Comfort's also a matter of personal preference, right? I mean, what TJ Oshie might find uncomfortable, I might say is just fine, or someone else. I mean, and I'm not picking on TJ by any stretch. I appreciate how open he was on the subject in that story, but this is some of the challenges the equipment manufacturers have run up against. And in fact, I can tell you from speaking to Greg McNeil, the subject of the story I dropped, he's been at this a long time, and it's actually his opinion that there isn't one right answer. He's calling for all equipment manufacturers to try all sorts of different things, because he understands that what works for 4 players in a room might not work for the 2 guys over here. And that, really the point is giving a range of options that players can try to protect all the real danger zones on the body from skate cuts. And eventually, you get to a point where you can mandate it, because there is something for everyone. And I think that neck protection, I mean, it's almost silly for me to speak from my personal experience, because it's so long ago that I played minor hockey. I do remember, though, it's sort of hot and chafes around the neck. Obviously, you're sweating in that environment. I was forced to wear a neck protection as a kid growing up in Canada. It's been that way as long as I can remember. So, you do get used to it. But, as I say, I think we have to start with the youth leagues as much as anything. I mean, I want to protect NHL players and American Hockey League players as well. Don't get me wrong. But in a lot of cases, or almost every case, we're talking about adults in that case. And ultimately, an adult has a choice with risk. I mean, they tell you not to smoke. You can still smoke if you want. It's not mandatory to do anything at a certain age. And so I think it's good to, we try to change the habits while they're young, or create a habit where it's just normal to wear this stuff. At the top level, of course, I think there's a lot of push to have even more cut resistant fabric. I can tell you, having spent 2 hours on the phone with Greg McNeil in the last 2 days, he's talking about this A9 is the level of cut resistance that is now being put into equipment. He said it's 300% better than what they've already had in terms of being more cut resistant. And so I think that there actually have been a lot of breakthroughs in terms of the kind of materials out there available. And so I think we're going to get to a point, hopefully, where everyone recognizes this, because obviously the catastrophic injuries get your attention. I mean, having this Adam Johnson situation, I mean, just horrible, awful, nothing good to be said about it. But we've had so many other players with close calls too. I mean, like it's not as uncommon as you think. It's obviously it's rare that we're having a player die on the ice in the way that Adam Johnson did, but it's still even not that rare. There's a 16-year-old that died less than 2 years ago playing a game in Connecticut, in the U.S. And so, between the number of players that are just getting cut and maybe don't have injuries that make headlines, to some like Evander Kane that gets stepped on and they miss several months of game action, that creates some attention. And unfortunately, when you have a death, I mean, I think when you add it all up, the signs are pointing you in an obvious direction here. But I think what it is going to take is the equipment manufacturers working with the leagues, working with the players. This is not you have to do this type. I think it's about collaboratively finding solutions here. Because there's going to be a shortage. I mean, I've seen today, American Hockey League, Seth Appert out of Rochester, Patrick Williams had a tweet, said that they're encouraging their players to wear neck guards. Some are doing it. On top of that tweet, Connor Carrick, who's playing down in Coachella Valley now in the American Hockey League, said he would get one as soon as his team could. I'm sure those conversations are happening at a level well beyond that. And so now it's about getting the right equipment available to the right players, and hopefully, find some options that might be more comfortable for those that have resisted them in the past, because I think it's quite evident we want the athletes to be safe, and frankly, how sharp the blades are. Now we're talking the pro game, how fast the players skate, how big the men are, the way they collide at the force. I mean, it's just too easy for these things to happen as total accidents. And I think it's incumbent upon the sport not to just say, well, it's unavoidable. I think we have to look for the solutions.
Very well said, CJ. This is definitely going to be a story we're going to be following as changes arise, I'm sure. I do not think this will be the last we'll talk about this story. We do have some other topics we will get to before the end of the show. It is Monday, so we are going to have Ask CJ. We've had a ton of questions come in. They could be about anything. Could be hockey questions, could be food questions, could be what's a really unique topic that
I literally did not look once at the queue, so I don't have an idea of any one question you might have chosen from.
So here's the funny thing about that. Normally, either you will or I will put out a call out for questions, and I'll try to at least get a sense of what those questions are before I prevent them. What's the flavor? Yeah. Exactly. I asked you to put out a call out minutes before I drove 3 hours from Edmonton to Calgary. So even me, we'll get there. But even me at the time of this recording, I do not have a sense of what has been asked today.
That's
it's going to be we are flying blind, to say the least.
Let's hope we don't go right into the ditch, because that's what this is the recipe for right now.
Okay, well, no one will be going into any ditch, CJ. Don't worry, I got this. I just wanted to make that point. But yeah, we'll talk about my weekend in Edmonton and the Nickelback concert that occurred in the middle of all of that. Of course, it was a hockey game too, but we'll get to You Can Bet That first. Welcome to You Can Bet That. Remember to hit up sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all of your gaming needs. Let's take a look at the odds for the Calder Memorial Trophy. Connor Bedard is the betting favorite at 1.57. Just around up the top five, Logan Cooley, Luke Hughes from the New Jersey Devils, Adam Fantilli, and Boston's Matt Patra. Those guys in the running for the Calder Memorial Trophy. CJ, who you got?
Well, I mean, you'd be a fool to go against Bedard, but, he got a lot of hype from our show, from basically anywhere in the hockey world that's had a chance to discuss it. And so, I think we should tip our hat to guys like Poitras. Even Fantilli, from what I've heard, he's on some nights been Columbus's best player in the early going of this season. And, you're talking about a player not yet 10 full games into the start of his NHL career. And so, some of these players have really made a seamless jump. I think Bedard, I can't imagine placing any wager against him in the race, just given what I think he can be and what he is. But that's not to say by any stretch of the imagination that there aren't a number of great young players out there playing their first season.
I'll say this, though. Seeing Logan Cooley at 850, second best odds to win the Calder Trophy, considering the preseason that he had, especially that sick goal he scored in preseason. Remember that game from down under? If I was really feeling frisky, it wouldn't. I don't think you're that wrong to put some money on that pick. Just saying. I don't know.
What's it going to take, though? I mean, it feels like he's going to really have to go and take. I mean, I think you have to, I guess, outpoint or outscore someone like Bedard to get the job done. That's probably what's going to have
to happen. Don't forget to check out sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all the best odds before game, in game. sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. This episode of the Chris Johnston Show is brought to you by BetterHelp. Do you ever feel like your brain is getting in its own way? Like, what you should do, what's good for you, but you just can't do it? You're laying awake in your bed, thinking about all these different things that, they might be personal thoughts, but they ultimately keep you up at night. I know therapy has helped me out in the past, and I know it can help you out too if you want to use it. Therapy helps you figure out what's holding you back so you can work for yourself instead of against yourself. And BetterHelp is a really good resource to use if you want to use it. It's helpful to learn positive coping skills, setting boundaries, being the best version of yourself. And you can all do that just by talking to a professional who's willing to give you that time of day. If you're thinking of starting therapy, again, I implore you to give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you could even switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/Johnston today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Johnston. CJ, there's a really interesting story developing with Evgenii Dadonov and the Ottawa Senators. I have to admit, the last few days, I've been preoccupied with the Heritage Classic, So you really got to help me out with this one. And please fill in the holes on where I think I got this wrong. But we remember when Dadonov was with the Senators and it gets shipped off to Vegas, and then Vegas tries to flip him to Anaheim, but there's a no trade clause that kind of blocks that from happening. And we all thought, okay, Vegas was trying to run this guy out. They're the ones in the wrong. But Vegas's complaint is how the Senators never really told them that about some of the specifics of this no trade clause, and they are still angry about it. And it seems as if there might be new information that really puts Ottawa in a bad light here. Do I have this right? I'm literally doing the thing where you're pointing at one thing, you're pointing at another thing, and you're just crossing your arms, hoping you got everything right. What am I missing? Why are we here? Let's talk about this.
Well, from a high level, you've got the
thank God.
points correct. I mean, this is a trade at the 2022 NHL trade deadline that was essentially reversed. It was a trade that, Vegas thought it was completing to send Dadonov to Anaheim, and it turned out that Anaheim was among the teams on a limited no trade clause he had. The problem for Vegas was they didn't know he had a limited no trade clause. And, the reason I think that they've pursued justice in this case is because that's not how the system's designed to work. And before we even dive into this, because I get that not all the listeners probably would realize this, the NHL trade clause situation is a little bit like the Wild West. I mean, some players are known to have a full no movement clause, it's called, or maybe a full no trade clause. That's pretty obvious what that means. You can't move that player without, first getting his signature signing off on that move. But for the players, and there's a huge number of them in the league that have, say, like 10 teams they can't go to, or 15 or 5, or whatever the number negotiated into their deal is, in a lot of those cases, the players simply have to send that list to the team each year on a certain date that's spelled out in the contract. And there's no sort of central database that keeps that information of what players chose. And there have been times in the past, I'll point you, for example, to Patrick Berglund, who got traded from St. Louis to Buffalo, essentially at the time because his agent, or he, depending on who you believe in that story, but nobody sent the trade list by the time it was supposed to have been submitted. And so in that case, he lost the right to his trade protection, and he got dealt to Buffalo. And so in this case, the Golden Knights and the NHL, it sounds like we're both led to believe that Dadonov did not file his no trade list before the appointed deadline in his contract. So when the Golden Knights initially acquired him, they did so under the belief that he did not have any trade protection whatsoever. And of course, they found out the wrong way, or the unhappy way, when they tried to trade him at the deadline and had that move rescinded or blocked. And so, what we're talking about is, procedurally, this is a little bit of a mess in general for any NHL contract. But in this case, the Golden Knights have wanted to see some justice done, I think, for lack of a better word. And it sounds like the NHL's investigation is down to its 11th hour, that there's, the league is at a point or a position right now where it's close to, administering a punishment here. And it does sound as though, according to sources, that the Senators are going to get hit with some kind of punishment as a result of the way this all happened. And so, I think at that point in time, we'll probably get a better, clearer explanation of exactly who said what and when and why this happened. But, it's tough news for the Senators franchise if, everything in the air is pointing to them, potentially having to say forfeit a draft pick as a result of this whole scenario playing out. And so, we'll just have to see when it comes down, but that's what it sounds like, that they're going to have to give up a draft pick as a result of this. And clearly there's a message being sent about, you can't. Here's the thing. I don't know how it happened. Maybe Ottawa didn't realize for some reason that the trade clause had come in, or, but, basically you're responsible for reporting that accurately, what a player's contractual status is when you're making this kind of trade.
Why don't we have a central place where we can figure out who, not only, obviously there's cap friendly, where you can discover contracts that have no trade clauses or no movement clauses. Why isn't there a central place, even if it's not for the general public, just for NHL teams, for GMs, for agents? Why isn't there a place where people could figure out which teams are on someone's no trade clause? Why does that not exist?
Well, it hasn't come up that I'm aware of as an issue until this situation. So probably the reason it doesn't exist is that there was never a problem, if you know what I'm saying. Like the system appeared to be working fine until this happened. Now, I know in the wake of the Dadonov situation, there has been some discussion at the league level about doing that, but my sense is that that's kind of been abandoned. So I don't know that we're going on the path to where there will be a centralized list kept like that. I could see why they don't want that falling into the wrong hands, that sort of information. Just given reporters like you and I work at the kind of outlet that might love to know that, out of 100 trade clauses, the Canadian teams are listed on 98 of them, or, there stuff like that could make pretty good fodder for a story. And I think that they're ultimately trying to respect that, players negotiate the right to have these no trade clauses lists, that they want that to be kept private because that's essentially something they negotiate into their deals. And so that must be an aspect of it. But as I say, unless something is reverse course that I'm not aware of, I don't think we're going to have one of those lists. Clearly, if there is a punishment here, the message being sent is, if you're making a trade, you better report accurately what's going on. The same way, you're not supposed to trade an injured player. You're supposed to disclose all that information as part of the trade process. That's why there's a trade call, right? The league's on there to make sure all the details are in order. That both teams mean it's the same third round pick, not maybe this other one you hold or whatever. It's to try to avoid situations like this. And so I think that the purpose behind any punishment now would be saying that Ottawa didn't handle that right for whatever reason at the time, and that created a further issue. And it's an issue the Golden Knights have not wanted to let go, even though it's, passed on now by, more than
and I don't blame the Vegas Golden Knights for wanting to fight this. I mean, I there seemed to have been, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but there was a reputation with the Vegas Golden Knights about how they were handling players and having them leave the franchise and getting them on their teams. And very much that Dadonov trade, it was embarrassing for them. We talked about it on this podcast about how weird that situation went through. And now we have this added context, and it's just even weirder. I don't blame the Vegas Golden Knights for wanting their pound of flesh at the end of all of this, considering how stupid they were made to look as a result of this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember all the takes at the time, but I think the general consensus was, this is Vegas, trying to force a player to leave and go somewhere he didn't want to go. But it does sound with much further reflection, and you remove the emotion and some time and the investigation, it does sound as though they're in a spot where the league has found that they weren't really at any fault. And so I don't know exactly where this is going to land and when it's going to land, but it does seem as though it's pretty close. And it's been a tough week on a number of fronts for the Senators. They've had some injury issues with Thomas Chabot, obviously the Shane Pinto gambling suspension that we covered on last Thursday's show. This is a sort of an issue of another making, but for a team that had so much optimism, right? Michael Andlauer takes over, and the start of a new season dawns. They've been dealt with some difficult circumstances in the
So what does this mean for Pierre Dorion? That's the biggest question I have in all of this. Let's say the Ottawa Senators are handed out a punishment, a pretty stiff punishment. Does this have any impact on his job? I mean, he already had a hot seat to begin with, considering the pressure put on the team for the season. I'm very curious how that shakes out if it gets to a point where they lose a high draft pick, as an example.
Well, and I think it depends exactly what the findings are a little bit here too, in terms of what his role is. But I mean, at that time, he was the head of Ottawa's hockey operations department in terms of title and responsibility. And so, even if something maybe isn't always your fault, I think back a number of years ago, but Dale Talon was a Chicago Blackhawks general manager and lost his job because they didn't file, they didn't hit some deadlines for restricted free agents in terms of filing qualifying offers. Probably not the GM's exact responsibility, but ultimately everything that happens under you is your responsibility. And Dale Talon ended up being fired not too long before Chicago went and won a Stanley Cup for the first time in this era in 2010. And so, not saying it's exact apples to apples here, but that's sort of, gives us an insight though into how teams react sometimes when an error has been made that's pretty punitive. And so I think we have to sit here and watch, but certainly Pierre Dorion's, there's been a lot of questions about what this ownership change means for him. He's been the general manager there for a long time, with, what I call a mixed record. I think that certainly it's hard to you look at the draft where he gets Stützle and Sanderson, and I'm not saying either was off the board picks. I mean, he had two of the top 5 picks, but it's hard to argue with the work he did there. The Sens have done a pretty good job finding some other players. Maybe haven't surrounded them with the best supporting cast at times to be ready to take this step. But he's got new bosses. There's a new owner. That owner's installed. Steve Stales was the president. You're getting some of something like this is not going to help things. I'll say that much. But I guess we have to wait and see how this shakes out. Exactly what the NHL findings are too, I think, are important. I mean, we're veering into the speculative here, if I'm being honest, just because it does seem as though what I'm comfortable saying is that the Senators appear in danger here of being punished for their actions. But I don't know where that blame is going to fall and exactly what has been found down to each detail. And I think that sort of stuff is important when it comes to talking about Pierre Dorian's role in all this.
We're definitely going to be following that story as well here on the CJ Show. One more thing before we get to Ask CJ, your questions off of Discord and Twitter. Let's talk about the Heritage Classic that took place yesterday in Edmonton at Commonwealth Stadium. You were probably watching from your couch. I was watching from the press box. I got to say, that was my first time being at an outdoor game. The atmosphere was great. I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun just watching the game, seeing the guys pull up in their respective costumes for both teams. Even the Nickelback concert wasn't that bad. I'm still not happy they didn't play Burn It to the Ground, but you know what? It wasn't that bad of a show. Plus the hockey itself, they kept it interesting up until the third period. The Oilers snapped their winless skid. The Flames are on a downtrodden path to somewhere. It's not going up for them right now, but a fun hockey game was had. The experience was fun. I'll have more insight from the inside. I also got to see producer Nick as well. It was really good to see him. But I would love to know your vantage point from watching it, if you got the chance to watch it.
It looked great on TV. It compelled me to turn away from my NFL Sunday, so that's a positive sign. And kept my attention as well. No, I'm just saying, it's not that I was obviously going to watch it for a little period of time, but I expected to maybe be like, because sometimes the quality of the games themselves isn't that great. It's just not always conducive. It's not the player's fault. But I actually enjoyed that game. At the risk of being an old here, Julian, I got to say, I don't fully understand the walking in the overalls thing I guess it's just a team building exercise.
I think of it more as like a team bonding type of thing. I thought it was interesting that Nazem Kadri came up with his team's idea of wearing the overalls and the cowboy hats. There's some guys who wore shirts underneath. I probably would have been one of those dudes because I know it wasn't that cold, but just wearing overalls and a straw hat, I don't know. I need a shirt underneath. I don't need to be exposing myself out in the cold like that. I like the Oilers get up where they're wearing the full on construction suits and the hard hats, right? And Connor McDavid had mentioned it was a little bit of a tribute to the hardworking Albertans. I like that line, but I thought it was cool. It's just a cool, funny thing. It's already a spectacle. Why not lean into it and do something fun?
Yeah, it's true. I guess you're leaning into the spectacle. You're it does create buzz on social media. I mean, there's no denying that. Probably arguably more than any goal or anything else from the game that those images, some of the shots, if you don't know what it's about, you're like, whoa, what is this? Right. If you're just scrolling through. And so that doesn't hurt. But I guess I actually remember, was it Nashville? Tampa played Nashville in an outdoor game a couple of years ago. And I remember Tampa went sort of full outfit, and those guys like to have a bunch of fun. So yeah, fair enough. That's part of it. I'll move on and get off. Let the kids play on my lawn here.
That's the most old take I've ever seen you have. I don't know you as a guy who has okay boomer takes.
Well, I'm not they should have been wearing suits. Just, I'm not saying that. I don't fully. Really, what I was saying is I don't get it. I'm not saying they can't do it or I think it's stupid. But I don't fully understand it. I guess other than you're just I liked it. I remember the Bruins back in the day. I think when they hosted the Winter Classic against Montreal, they wore 3-piece old timey suits. That looked pretty cool. I guess we're just veering into literally almost Halloween costumes. Team Halloween costumes is almost what we're getting to. And maybe that's part of the point. We're sitting here so close to October 31st. But yeah, I digress. I don't even know why I did you wear a
Halloween costume this year? Well,
it's
that's
tomorrow.
fair, but yeah, but like I mean, like
I
this
didn't-
past weekend, like that would have been the time for Halloween parties and stuff like that. Like I didn't get to do any Halloween stuff this year. I was just curious if you did.
Dude, you have no idea what it's like being 40. Nobody is going to a Halloween party at age 40.
Nobody?
Like, really. Like, I went out with some friends on Saturday night downtown, which is not normal. And nobody would nobody in our age band that was like at a bar was wearing a Halloween costume. Now, when I took the subway, it was Halloween costumes everywhere. And they're, people in their 20s. And I get it. I'm not hating on that. But like, not a lot of 40-year-olds are going out in the city or going to house parties. I mean, maybe those with kids. I don't have my own kids. So that's probably the one asterisk to apply there. But no, I didn't wear a Halloween costume this weekend. But I will wear one on Tuesday to hand out candy.
I like that.
So,
I like that. I was at a karaoke bar.
It's like I'm not like a bah humbug about the whole thing. I just
and yeah.
Like I'm dressing up as a peanut butter sandwich. Like I would imagine if I was like on the TTC dressed as a peanut butter sandwich.
I forgot you mentioned that you were going to dress up as that. Yes, that's true. Crunchy or smooth?
I told you I love both, but if I had to choose one or the other, I would go with smooth. But I got no hate for crunchy. I'm
that's
smooth
fine.
OG,
I don't think you could really go wrong with either. I lean towards smooth, but there's nothing wrong with crunchy peanut butter. Like that's fine. I think that's totally cool.
I've had some really weird experiences, by the way, recently on the subway with like people recognizing me and asking me weird questions. And like, I don't know how much I want to go into it here because I do not want to encourage copycat behavior. But I'm just thinking, imagine if I had to went downtown on Saturday wearing like a peanut butter outfit and I got recognized on there. Like that would be all kinds of calamity.
Where's the jelly?
But the funniest one is I was coming home from a Leafs game at one of the nights earlier this season. Obviously, I'm wearing like a tie and suit or whatever. Someone asked to take my selfie on the subway, so I get up and take a selfie with them. And then I sit back down beside the woman beside me. She's wearing like a nurse's kind of outfit. And she's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm a hockey journalist." And I'm like, "I'm a hockey journalist." She was like, "Oh," she seemed like disappointed. I think she thought I was maybe someone actually famous or something.
Man. Oh man.
And I had another incident with some dudes who were like drinking beer on the subway, who were like bringing me all their loose hot takes.
No.
Anyway.
No. Oh man.
This is what happens when you're out in the wild and you're like vaguely recognizable. Like you just never.
I went out to a karaoke bar in Edmonton this past weekend, and I'm sure you've gotten to interact with Tony Brar, who does some media stuff for the Oilers.
Oh yeah.
And that at that bar,
most.
Oh my god! Like he is like, you want to know how positive he is? He watches stuff and either rates it on a scale of like generational. There's another like positive quality and amazing. Like he doesn't believe in saying that watching a movie was bad.
Tony Brar makes Tony Robbins
It's insane.
Look like a pessimist.
He is the most positive human being you could ever come across. We sang Country Roads together at this country bar, and he just started off by doing this whole speech, just wanting everyone to come together and like do this "Go Oilers" cheer. Like he wanted everyone to be happy. Like he is that dude. He is that dude. But yeah, a whole bunch of people, I guess maybe around my age, maybe a little older, were all wearing costumes. And I did feel a little bit of FOMO because I did not have a costume up. But hey, good time was had by all, I guess.
It's too bad the Flames didn't include you in your plans. You could have been wearing the overalls.
It's funny you asked that question because, this is probably the best time as ever to transition over to AskCJ. We'll be taking your questions off of Discord and Twitter. But Christian on Discord asked, out of you, so I guess me in this case, CJ and producer Nick, who would rock the overalls hat idea the best? You think I'd rock it well?
I mean, I don't want to hit Nick with a stray bullet here, but I feel like you have probably the best physique of any of us to rock it. So
I'm a bit bulkier. I know maybe. I don't know. I could see Nick pulling this off. I would laugh my ass off at producer Nick wearing this outfit.
I mean,
You would wear it.
Don't
You'd be
get me
fine.
wrong. Like I'm not, but I feel as though I might offend some children that are too close. Like,
Why? Why would you feel it? Would you have like chest hair like sticking out?
I don't know what part of me just like spill out of that.
You
thing.
look
That's
pretty.
all.
You look pretty good. Like, just with your physique,
I do
you've
my
done
best.
pretty well. You know, like I don't think you'd defend anybody.
We're being painfully honest here, but I'm not picking me.
From MW Bauer 29, CJ, do you see Joseph Wool, Wall or Wool? Joseph Wall, the brick wall.
The
Okay,
brick
like brick
wall.
wall. Joseph Wall overtaking Ilya Samsonov as the number one goalie for the Leafs.
I mean, it seems to already be happening. I know it's so early in the season, and things could change. There's a lot of unknowns here, but the fact that they're sending Wall out on Tuesday in the game against Los Angeles, based on him playing a few games in a row last week and having success, I don't know if we can say he's fully taken the job, but I think the door is open for him to take it, and he's walked partway through it. Now, the flip side of that will be he's young, he's unproven to a degree. He doesn't have a big NHL resume. And so, if Wall stumbles at a certain point, I don't know how big of a leash he'll get or how much of a safety net he's got in terms of maybe turning the net back over to Samsonov. I mean, in all seriousness, I think this will be something we got to watch for 60 games before we can even really say who's starting game one of the playoffs, because it could go back and forth. And Wall has never played the kind of workload that you'd maybe want your starter to have played in a given season. Samsonov has not really ever done that either. He's only played ever around 40 games at the top point. And so I just think let's sit back and watch it play out. But you can't deny right now that Wall has played a lot better, that he's got the majority of the wins. And I think the coaching staff want to throw him in there when there's, when it's a flip ball right now or a jump ball.
Okay, the first two questions I gave you were from Discord. Now it's time to delve into the Twitter questions, which again, I have not seen until this point. Carly I
hope my Twitter got crazy.
What was the phrase you said off air about crazy? You want crazy in your house?
I said you put some crazy in my house, Julian.
Be careful what you ask for, CJ. Carly Agro has a question. Working on this contract for school, so maybe I'm biased, but based on the first 9 games, how underpaid is Alex DeBrincat?
Wow, I mean, huge. If you're going to tell me he's going to have the numbers he's got to start the year, and I don't have them in front of me, but I know he's right up there in the scoring race. You would be paying him a lot more than you are. I mean, that's where we're at, man. Like that's how contracts go. There's always an element of risk. There's an element of risk with signing someone in the offseason or letting it play out. There's risk. You sign the big contract, someone gets injured. I mean, you're paying for past performance. And let's face it, DeBrincat didn't come off his best season last year in Ottawa. I'm sure there's a lot of reasons, for that aren't just totally on the player's shoulders. But, he's had a great start moving back home to Detroit. And yeah, he looks like a bargain right now for the Red Wings, but I think it was a 4-year deal. So there's 3 years and 7/8 of a year left.
From John R. For Chris and Julian, where would you choose to live if you could only eat the cuisine from that country? Ooh,
Italy.
Okay. I'm picking Jamaica. Yeah, I'll go eat ackee and saltfish all day. I'm good with that. I'm cool with that. Italy's a good pick.
I'm eating pizza for like 3/4 of my meals for the rest of my life. And then when I'm mixing in something else, I'm going to like spaghetti.
That's a variety in your life.
I hope there's some vegetables in Italy, or I might get a little sick at a certain point.
I'm sure you'll be fine.
I know there's tomatoes, but
tell you what, if you eat enough pizzas over there, you'll fill in and you'll look really good in those overalls if you wear that outfit.
I know, but there won't be any pizza over there. I don't think, and that's just gonna be a shame.
Not pizza. What am I gonna do? Oh no!
Stuck with
Damn
all
it.
Italian pizza. Producer Bruce says, "Stop it." Producer Drew, producer Drew's filling in for producer Nick today, and he's not having that comment.
I don't know if we need to look. No disrespect to producer Drew. I think he's disqualified from talking about food. When he had that take about what was it about beets over cranberry sauce for Thanksgiving, that should immediately disqualify him from discussing food in any case. I don't understand.
I actually
That's
don't
a
hate that take.
no. That's not a good alternative.
I didn't actually hear that.
He did that on the Camp and Stew podcast.
I've never had
Drew and Stew.
Drew
Sorry,
and Stew.
Camp and Stew. Whatever. Sorry, my bad. Drew and Stew.
Yeah. Okay, I'm in. He can sell me on that, even though he's crap talking pizza in our comment section here, which is akin to challenging,
Oh
me to
my
a fight,
god.
basically.
Okay. All right. Before we have any more disputes break out, Taylor Choma, maybe you were up on this, maybe you weren't. What's your favorite vault track from 1989, Taylor's version?
Okay, so I actually wanted to message the group chat. What was all this 1989 all over my social media?
I'm the wrong person to ask about this. I'm the wrong person to ask about this.
Look, I'm not kidding. It was everywhere on my social media, and I'm confused. Like that isn't like that album's been out.
Yeah,
forever.
but I think Taylor is like re-releasing like some of that stuff. Like that's why you see some of the stuff as like Taylor's version.
Oh.
I think it's like a recording. It's a recording thing.
Okay.
Like maybe some of the like there's one album, was it Speak Now, where like a lot of the publishing and stuff like that, she wasn't getting all of that. And I think by her re-releasing it, she's supposed to get money from it, basically. Maybe I'm not explaining it right, but it's something to do with that. Like that's why it's being re-recorded. Yeah.
Okay, I can get behind that. I will say this, as the OG
Yes.
listeners of this show will know, I do like me some Taylor Swift, but I find it a little bit difficult to keep up with everything because I'm not spending my entire day like a Swiftie, like just devouring all the news out there. And so some stuff like that comes along. I'm like, why are people throwing parties with like 1989 balloons? Like, I don't understand this.
So you weren't at any of those parties, huh?
No, I told you, man. I was over there going like yelling at a cloud, like, "Wow, these guys wearing these outfits to the."
Okay,
Heritage Classic."
I appreciate producer Drew filling us in here. So Taylor Swift re-releases the album Friday night. It's a 10-year anniversary. She gets the solo rights back to her music after 10 years. So literally, this is just her like just celebrating that essentially. So that's why this is happening.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Whoa.
Okay. Yeah.
Don't
Okay.
read that one out loud.
All
We
right.
might
I'm
get
not
some
going to read
trouble.
that next one out because I like my life. How about from J-Pucks? What has been the feedback on the Frozen Frenzy that happened last week? Is this something we could see again in the future? I think it would be fun on a Saturday or Sunday and started earlier in the day. This would have to happen after football season, of course.
I think you're going to see it for sure. I mean, there's actually one other day already on this season's schedule that features it. But I do think moving forward, the early returns on it seem largely positive. Like anything you do differently, I'm sure a few teams didn't appreciate a weird wonky start time. I know some games in different markets started at sort of funny hours, but I think you're going to see it again. I mean, look at ESPN seemed to like it. They did their sort of knockoff of
Ice
surfing or whatever we call that. Ice surfing. I don't know why I can't keep my head straight on that. But I think that they like that they're a newish league partner. I think you're going to see it again. And I know gambling probably isn't a good thing to talk about right now, given what's happened last week, but I do think it's kind of interesting for people that want to bet on lots of games to have them just rolled out in succession.
And last one for you from a Rink Rat Report. I'm not asked. I have no idea how this team played yesterday. But the question from Rink Rat Report is, how about them Cowboys?
Oh, I mean, that was a great
What
game.
happened? What happened? I have no idea.
They demolished the Rams.
Damn. That's why Coop.
A big week for Sean McVay. I know he becomes a father for the first time, but He looked tired of the sidelines, bud, and I think that more reason than one.
Welcome your offspring into the world with a loss to the Dallas Cowboys. Yeesh. Jeez.
Dude, have some respect.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
I just saying, it's not like you're losing to the worst team in the league. Like, I'm not saying you have to say they're going to win a Super Bowl or nothing like that, but like losing the Cowboys isn't that. I mean, I get that it might be spiritually bad for you, but it doesn't say necessarily.
No, the Dallas Cowboys are supposed to be good, right? With all the resources that they put in. So when they win, it's like, yeah, whatever. Okay, they're supposed to win. But when they lose,
they had 33 points at halftime yesterday.
That's great. Good for them.
They are good.
That's great. No, I'm not saying they're not good. I'm saying good for you. You're allowed to have a good. You're allowed to.
Like, I can't believe you didn't see the fireworks all the way from Edmonton.
No, because I was watching the fireworks and pyrotechnics from Chad Kroger and Nickelback. That's why I didn't watch that game. I didn't even watch the Jets yesterday, and they won in overtime against the New York Football Giants.
I thought the Jets were kicked out of the league when.
No, remarkably, we're still allowed to exist because seeing Jets fans suffer gets a lot of people off.
I thought you were relegated at that
no,
point.
They have
I've not been aware of one Jets.
No, you're confusing the idea of relegation for the other football that happens. And no, the soccer club I cheer for has not been relegated as of yet. I'm waiting for that. It probably won't happen this year. But losing to Man City will have you think a lot of things. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yes, sir.
You're all over
Let's
the
just
place.
end the show before I start crying on recording right now. Thanks so much for watching CJ's show on the Monday. In all seriousness, I'm not going to cry here. CJ, great show as always. We'll be back on Thursday with a brand new show. Enjoy Halloween and all the great costumes. And we didn't get to do costumes this year, but you could always go back to last year when CJ dressed up as Adam West Batman.
I hope that you get lots of Reese's Pieces. Not Reese's Pieces, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups left over, too.
Those are good.
That's my hope.
Those are good.
Those are like the last thing I'm giving out to the kids because those are what I want.
Are you going to give them Aero bars?
No comment.
You keeping them for yourself, huh? And you keeping them for yourself because you're going to be the only one who's going to be able to eat those because none of those kids want Aero bars.
We can't go into last season, man.
What are you, Jacob Markstrom? Yeah, we don't talk about last year. Is that what this is?
You and I don't talk about last year. We're on to
Cleveland. We're on to Cincinnati. We're on to Cincinnati. We're on to episode 195, which will be Thursday's episode. For CJ, I'm Julian. So long and peace.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Powered by Sports Interaction, your homegrown sportsbook. Always remember to bet local.
Inside the game twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian McKenzie @JK and McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.